Hi, this is Christoph Aschwannen from Noble Master Games. I'm gonna show you in this tutorial video how to do custom modding of troops, for example a custom tank. I assume you watched the last video that explained how to set up a regular map, and that's what I did here. I set up a normal map with the default settings, and now let's see how to add, for example, a custom tank or custom trees. So I assume you already downloaded the template zip. I have it here. Usually you just use the bundle configuration file and that's it. But if you want to do custom modding, there's a couple more files you will need to consider. And to look at those, we can open them one by one, but it's a little bit tedious. So what I recommend is you use a tool like Notepad++ or the other editors too, where we have a directory structure view of the files that you're gonna be working with. Yes, so Notepad++, anything else is fine too. I have a little bit an older version here, but I think it doesn't matter. So here I have the template zip unpacked already. And instead of opening the files one by one, let me just drag the folder here into Notepad++ and voila, we got it here. So here, that's the regular bundle configuration file that you always load, and they create the new map, and it just has the default troops and structures and everything in there. So here maybe there's some license file. I mean, you can use all the graphics from Noble Master, but if you use graphics from other games, don't do it. I mean, you can do it for yourself, but you can't really upload it to the map server if that's what you want to do. So just don't take Command and Conquer tanks and put them in the game unless you want to do it for personal use. Then here the Readme. Basically all the files are in the human JSON format. You can also use JSON, that's fine too, but the human JSON format is a little bit more readable, so I recommend you do that. There is a link to it, human JSON, it explains how it works. Basically it's JSON but a little bit more simple. You can, let's see, can go through it. You don't need commas to separate values. You can add comments, which is very helpful. Without comments, I think it would be difficult to do in certain places. You don't need quotes. And what else do we got? And multi-line strings are supported, and such and such. You can read about it a little bit more here. The human JSON format isn't very well supported on every editor, so if you can't get it to show nicely, you can also set the formatting of the files that are provided here to YAML format, which is I think a subset of JSON or human JSON, or potentially set it to JSON 5, and you get it nicely formatted. So yeah, usually parameters, key value pairs or arrays. If a value is blank, you can enter a dot. That's more game specific, that's how it's parsed. And yes, that's the basics. So if you close those and go back, so you see the bundle configuration file that you load, it basically just imports another file. So we're gonna go down the rabbit hole. So here's the modal directory, which contains the default assets for all the troops and everything you see. Not the assets, actually, the definitions. All the assets, the graphical assets, sound effects and cursor images are already bundled with the game for if you use the default ones. But in this directory there is everything that defines what kind of factions are in there, and links to all the graphical assets, sound effects that are already defined. So here, let's see. So the bundle file includes all. Then here we include again another HJSON. I know it's a little bit funky that way, but we do for the campaign, we do a few custom mods also for the sciences, for the research. So it's disabled in earlier mission but available in later missions. So if you so basically just use the all file. The regular include is fine too, but it doesn't have the latest tech. The superiority tank is not going to be in there yet. So you include all, and the superiority tank is in there too, so you can build it with the GRA faction. So let's look at the general include. Here, the defined part defines the parameter substitutions. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I find it a lot easier to have a name rather than an ID. I mean, this one here, this part here is a little bit maybe not too complicated to understand, but if you have to work with numbers, you get confused pretty quickly. So I recommend, if you do custom modding and you have a lot of different ID numbers, maybe just put them into a key. So here, let's see what is included. So here, that's the common graphics for mouse and other things. So we have all the mouse cursors defined. I mean, you could modify them too. I don't have an example yet in there, but maybe in the future I provide one too. And you see here too, all the directories are relative directory to this current file. You can also, if you want to do it, you could also use it absolute directory. But I probably would recommend against it, because now you just can copy around the whole directory structure and it still works. Then here, the actors subfolder, we have the actors, the factions. Here are all the factions listed. Let me not go into the details, otherwise we're going to be there in 2 hours and you still don't know the half of it. So let me just go over quickly. That's the technologies that you can select, they're defined here. Then here the groups, that's the teams, the alliances, all the faction alliances that are in there, Alphabet, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie also. You can edit this file. Actually, you shouldn't edit this file, I'll get to that later. I mean, you can, but maybe you don't want to for later. Then traits, that's the time periods are defined, is currently just one. We have the items, if you want to have new items, that defines matter, and uranium, that's the main items. But also energy is separate, the power grid that you create, or the ore that you mine, or the T crystals have their own matter ID, natural gas, thermal vent too. Next we got study, that defines all the available research, the tech tree that's available. And at the moment it's fixed, so when the game starts it can define which faction gets which tech, but maybe in the future making it so that it can be altered through research, or maybe progressing through, what do you call it, through time. Then next, here are all the figureheads defined. I'm going to go over that later when I explain how to do your custom campaign. Basically that's Agent Johnson right now and Major Tom, they have some figureheads in there. They can also be obviously configured, or new can be added. Then the arena, that's the map, that's the common map info, map stuff. Map borders, you know, the border around the map. Let me show you, that would be the images here. You can change them if you like. Oops, wrong directory. Then let's go, where was I? Or for example, fog of war, how it looks. What we got here too? Rain, animation, images, roll over effects, and so on, and the generic or like shared music, like when you select a unit, when you target a unit. Yeah, this file contains more the shared assets that most or all the troops use, and also are used for the map itself. It's a lot, there's a description, maybe you read through it. It's not going to too much detail. Then here we have the tiles, we have water, earth, grass, muddy and snowy. You can add your own too. They could be configured as well. Then fight. Let's go here. It's peace. That's all our map objects. That's not the terrain tiles, but all the map objects you have here, that's the defines all the different weapon systems, or all the different weapon modalities. Cut is slicing, for example, dog attacks, DMGs, wall or attack or sabotage. And instead, yeah, as I said before, I'm using a parameter cut, but if you want to, you could also directly use the number. If you're really good in numbers, I mean, go for it. I mean, I could just do that. But I find it a little bit hard to read. And it makes it easy to change the numbers later. You don't have to go one by one to change the numbers. You just change the number here. Let's say, oh shit, I don't want to have 11, I want to have 92 for this weapon modality. Then genre defines the build options, you know, the build menu. Let me show you. The build menu here, that's the different options you can define here. Defense can enable air structures that can be set in the genre file. You can add more. I think maybe 5 is probably best, or you can change it. Or yes. Then next. And then here the meat. That's all the models that are defined here. Because it's a lot, I did another include. So as I said, we're going down the rabbit hole. We have here impact effects, that's explosions, tire tracks. What else we got here? The global map shake, it's also defined as an action. That's also sound effects, like raised effects, ground fire, cloaking effects, transforming effects. Stuff is defined here. Nature, trees, and saurium, like other map objects that are considered nature in my opinion, or plateau graphics. This one is reserved. Then we have weapons. That one is not that long, it's like ballistic weapons, melee weapons, bullet, shell, missile, bombs, everything. The weapons graphics, or like how they function, is all in this file. Here we have generic map objects. What do we have here? Map pings. Parachute graphic, if you want to change it. Gravel, dirt road, civilian houses are here too. Maybe they could go into site too, but they're now here. It doesn't matter that much. Then relics and stuff. Then here, that's the site graphics. That's all the structures that the faction usually can build. Again, the parameters are described here, and then below it, that's actually the definition, so it's easier to work with. For example, the barracks are defined here, the picture for the barracks, the regular one, and then the fan attachment is defined here. When it's built, some lighting, some flashes and stuff are defined here. And if I would go to the barracks below there, let's search it. Here is the actual definition for the barrack, the name, info, how it can be built, how much it costs. And here would be the graphics I described above, the barrack image or the fan graphics. And you see it's offset, so you can kind of cobble it together, like different graphics form one structure with animation partly or not. And the same goes for the units. It's a lot of units, so it's I think about 100, maybe less. So yes, that's kind of the basics. That's what's in the game by default, and that's the default bundle configuration. It just includes everything that's already in the game. And the assets, now you're wondering, wait, where are the graphics? How do I do it? Custom modding. So let's try to go there. So now, if you want to do custom modding, you open the custom folder. And here, wow, you have another bundle configuration file. And we do the same. We also include all the graphics that are already provided, and all the default factions, default tanks, and everything is included. You don't have to. You can do everything completely from scratch, but I'm not sure how feasible it is. But maybe for the start, maybe just try to create one. Um, um, Create a new configuration by maybe adding a one unit, see how it goes. And again, the folders are relative. Dot slash goes one folder up, because we are in here, we have to go one directory up into bundle, and then we load again the model directory, the include all, which should make it easy. Again, you can do absolute path, but I don't recommend it. So when you do custom modding, some numbers are reserved for when we do updates. So if you add custom graphics or sound effects or cursors, the IDs that you're gonna use, make them be between 1 million and 1,999,999. And then the models, like the custom troops and such, they start for you by 100,000 to 199,000. I know it's a lot, that's large numbers, but if you use a parameter for those, it shouldn't actually matter too much. It's just that the IDs we create don't interfere with your IDs, so you can be safe to know, wait, that ID that I use here, it's not going to be used by us. And we know too, you're not going to overwrite what we did for better or worse. I mean, you can overwrite what we did, but you just use your own IDs, and we are all safe. Then also those names are somewhat reserved, so I suggest don't use them. That's some predefined graphics IDs that we have a special parameter for, so don't do it that way. Don't use gfx dot. You could maybe use gfa dash if that's what you want, but don't use dot. So also you can modify the files that are provided here, but once we provide an update, you could just go and replace that model directory here and just use our latest update. But if you directly modify the files, if you have an update, new balancing, new troops, you would have to go in one by one and see what we changed. So I recommend you just work separately, unless you completely want to change it and make it a completely new game. I hope it makes sense so far. So now we include the default, include all, and here's the meat. The modded directory contains a custom object, the custom graphics. You can call it any other way. You can add more files, include them here directly also, but I thought maybe this way might be the way it makes the most sense. And so here we have two parts basically. We have the assets, the graphical and sound effects. You maybe could add cursor images too. Let me know and that provide some examples. So that's the asset, the graphical asset. So if you go here, there's yet another HJSON, and this file loads all the graphics you want to use, your custom graphics. And as I said before, your ID should start with 1 million for custom graphics and sound effects. So we started 1,100,000, and I added a new fraction as an example, and we can go in and have a look how I did it. So the asset folder, and I put it here. Let's see if that works. I put the graphic here. I mean, it's a little bit small, but that's how it is. And that's the head for the Bulls faction. Also have a tree, and that's a tree stump. That's when the tree is raised and by a tank, for example. Where was I? That's the wrong one. Hold on. So here we have the Bulls faction. We download, we import the image for the faction, and there's a mask, so it gives you the round image. You can do it yourself and remove this part if you don't want to do it. Have the game do it, but I think it might be better that way, so it matches what the other faction icons look like. Then cram means we reduce the number of colors to 256 and we dither it. That's to save space. If you have a huge map and people download it, people might not be happy to wait an hour to download your huge file. Also, I think the file size is limited maybe to 50 megabyte. So you are in a kind of be conservative on how many images and stuff you use, but you should be able to put everything in, but don't waste too much. So here that's a faction head, ID 1,101. Then we have the tree and the race tree 1,200 and 201. So that's the assets we are loading. I'm going over the tank a little bit later, just to show you how this basically works. One second, where was I? So we have the assets that are loaded here, and then we have the definitions which puts everything into the map here. That's the same as we have defined here. If you go to the actor, added a new balls faction, and as I said, start with 100,000, 100,010, and that's the two images we imported. One is the icon and one is the other one is for the user, and this is just the default parameter for when the faction is killed and stuff. And you can give it a name, description, color. That's how the default color. The name of the player, the default name if it's the AI, male, female, can also be neutral, and when the player was born. And then when you go into the piece file, that's like the map object file, we have the tree defined over here. It's a desert tree, we say. Name, info, how it's positioned and stuff. I'm gonna go over that a little bit later when we talk about the tank. And that's the hitbox, hit parameters, like HP and stuff. And here, the view defines the graphics we import. Maybe I should go into more detail too. Usually in the game there's three parts: the specification that specifies the name and behavior, the U, that's for your graphical assets, to say how the object is gonna look, and the tone is for audio assets, what audio assets are gonna be played. That's kind of used throughout the game. So it also for map objects, specification, how it's defined, what it does, how it moves, how it lives, how it looks, and how it sounds. Tree doesn't sound right now, but you could have a sounding tree probably. Okay, so now that's done. Let's try it out. So right now you're going back to the map, and what you do also when you update maps, you can update maps and upload it again to the server. You don't use new, obviously, because I don't create the new map, but you just update it. And I suggest if you try to add new graphics, maybe don't work on the map that you already have, but create some test map and just test it in that map, and once you're happy with the result, update the map that you really want to use for the graphics. Because I suggest the graphics examples that are in there are not very, make not really much sense. It's just there to show how it works. So what I would do is, for you custom, what do you call it? For your custom troops and stuff, you just remove everything that you don't want to use. And maybe not this way. Maybe let's say you don't want to use the tree, you just delete it here. And from the assets, it's not going to be loaded. And then you also delete it from here. So it's not going to be in your map. And it also saves space. So I really recommend just remove whatever you don't want to use and just keep what you actually want to use. Otherwise its map size is going to increase, and if you don't use the desert tree anyway, it makes little sense. It's more in there as an example. So yes, I'm talking too much about maybe less important details. So yes, so you have your map. Now we have defined our custom assets and we update the map bundle. And yes, that's the template zip we already downloaded. And now usually use the bundle configuration file here, but now we go into our custom bundle configuration, which has the tree added and our custom faction. and you just update, and it adds it all to the map. Depending how many assets you have, it might take a little bit longer if you load a lot of images. If you do it wrong, you will get an error too. Now the bundle is updated. I didn't save it yet, but maybe let's do that now. And once it's added, you can't remove it. So I suggest just play around with the test map or with the map you throw away later. Before you add whatever you want to do to the map you actually have maybe already set up or you want to do. That's how I usually did it. So now let's have a look. So I added the custom faction. If I go to the faction list, I have already 2 factions. What I can do is, let's see, I have the regular factions that are always in there, and you have the bulls. Yeah, something isn't quite right if you import it the first time, but it's gonna be okay later. So we change to the bulls and save it. So we have the bulls here, and just to show you that I have to fix that. If you go back and load it again, it all looks fine. It's if it wouldn't work, it would give you an error message. So we have the bulls faction now here. I forgot what color I gave it. So the color should be reflected too. I think it's still blue. Also what we did, we added the desert tree. That's the new tree that I showed you. And as I said, it's set up so you can raise it. Just like the other image that when you walk over it. But I guess you don't want to add a tree. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you want to have some custom nature. That's fine too. But what you probably want to do is you want to add a tank or so. And you kind of wonder, wait, how do I add a tank? Tree is pretty easy. And I added function in the menu. Go to template and export the graphics. All the graphics, besides I think tile graphics and faction graphics, can be exported. It's not in there yet. Not sure if I will add it or if I just provided this example directly. Some like map shake have no image, so nothing is going to show, but if you scroll down, you see all the graphics we have. Let's see, we want to have maybe a tank to show you how it works. Let's see. You select the unit you want to mod, like a space. You don't have to export it, it just gives you an idea how it all works. Maybe let's take the superiority tank. And then we save all the images that I used to create the tank. And that's export, and then after the ID is going to be added, just select the directory, export tank, example like that. And it has exported 71 images. Let's go back. So now here, that's the tank export I did. It exports everything, all the parts that the tank defines. It's not really the below the second part here, that's the ID for the graphics ID 530 1120. That's just for the what do you call it, the parachute, and that's the parachute shadow that's shared between different units, so you don't actually need to re-add it to the game. You just use what's already provided, unless you want to have a different parachute. In that case you need to add your own. Here I don't actually recognize what's that. That's also something that's shared. What could that be? I think it's explained later. Then here, that's maybe that's what we want. We have the tank body. We only have 17 images because for the tank, because it can be rendered, can be shown mirrored. So what I did is to save space for the, so you don't have to load that many assets. You only have the right hand side of the tank when it rotates, and the rest is just mirrored, so it would just be mirrored to the other side. Then here we have the color coded version, so that's when you color the tank. Basically it's whitish, white gray, and with the factions blue, this will change to blue and will be overlaid over the tank. Then we have the turret, same thing, we only do half, I believe. And the same is with the carbon, like a color coding, that's if you want it. I think for the turret maybe you don't really need it, just do the tank body. Let's delete those, don't actually need those for what I wanted to show you. So that's just for a reference if you kind of wonder, hey, how does that structure or unit look like? You can just try to export it via here, export graphics. So now, other part is, the last part is you want to have a custom tank, I assume, or a custom other unit. So adding trees and faction icons is rather straightforward, but then when it comes to adding tanks and stuff, you want to kind of model it. You have to kind of maybe model it in a 3D application. Yes, so let's look at the details. All the assets used in the game are rendered out 3D models, but you can do it by hand, it doesn't matter. But it might be a little bit tedious if you would need to provide 32 directions for a single unit. But I guess it can be done if you just want to create one. So for the setup, let's go look at the setup. If you model it, for example, in Blender, the camera has to be at 61 degrees from the ground. That's how the units have to be rendered to be working. If you're a little bit off, it usually doesn't matter. But for some troops, such as the Chinook, if it's not at exactly 61 degrees and we render the other parts, what do you call it, the engines animation is a little bit on the side, it's offset and a separate graphic. If you don't have it at 61 degrees, it won't properly render out at the correct location. So say best maybe to do it correct the first time, set all the camera angles to 61 degrees. That the base tile here is 64 times 56 pixels. That's considered 1.0, and yeah, that's also 1.0 because we're looking a little bit from the top and on the side. And the dimension up, it's 31 pixel, about 31 pixel for 1.0 up. 2.0 up would be 62 pixels up about. There's some math involved, you can maybe confirm it if you like. And circles would be projected this way because it's not exactly square, it's a little bit, the camera angle is not exactly from the top, it's a little bit from the side. So if you do the models in 3D and you wanted them to be exact, just follow the guidelines here. It's also in the modding zip. And then let's look at the tank. So Tony the artist, he did it in 3D and then he just rendered out 32 images. Or for the tank we don't need that many. Rendered them out. We have the body image here and there's 2 animation frames. Like it moves up a little bit. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video. Like it's very subtle actually here. And he rendered out 32. But because I mirrored it, we only actually need 17. And the one, yes, maybe why not 16? Because the one up and down has to be separate. So here too, I guess you maybe can see the animation subtle. So we have 2 frames per direction. That's for the body, tank body. Then here we have again the color coded layer. You can do white and grayish for it, but I think for Tony it was easier to do it red and green. So the game parses it, so the red part is going to be the CC layer and the green part is going to be ignored. But you can just do white gray, it doesn't matter if that's easier for you. But you see, if you do animation, it's a lot of images, 34. You need the CC layer too, even more. Then we got the turret. For the example, I left out the CC layer because I think you don't really need it. I just used the turrets that I had and just added a little tree on top. It's just an example. That's how you maybe could do it. So that's all the tank parts we're gonna use. Now let's look at the details. You go here, I promised you we look at it in detail. So here the asset HJSON. Here is the tank body. We load the tank body. And we only load 17. We have 32 directions, but we only load 17 and then mirrored. That's then indicated in the other file by ID. That would be 1,300,000 and then -m to indicate it's mirrored. So only 17 are going to be used and the rest is going to be mirrored internally. That's the path to the file, and just maybe do it that way. I think it doesn't work if you add .png to the end, so just do it. The file name underscore and the star to indicate the files, and they're loaded in alphabetical order. So make sure that if you have animations, so the first two just loaded, the first two are loaded as one frame, the second two are loaded as animation, the third two are loaded as animation. So you have to make sure you number them so they're loaded correctly. So here we load 2 frames per direction. So we indicate it by 2. You can have 5. So you would have to provide 5 animation frames. Instead of 0001, 0002, we have to add 3, 4, 5 also. It doesn't, the numbering doesn't matter too much. It just has to be in alphabetical order. So the game can do it. And just don't do 1, because then I think it might be ordered wrongly. Just do 01 to be safe. Let's go back. And for the animation, we say 100 milliseconds per frame. You have 2 frames. And it's looping. Also reduce it to 256 colors. And that's going to be our tank with 2 frames, up a little bit up and down, and looping. And I think for troops, maybe that makes the most sense. We have the same for the color coding layer. We just have it in a different directory. And here's the gray parser, the special one that parses red and ignores green and changes everything to white gray. If you already provide grayish images, you just comment it out. You don't need it. And then the turret. We don't have a CC layer here. We have also 16, 17 directions. And that's the ID number for the turret. Then that's the graphical assets we load. And the tank is defined here. Again, we have it set up here. I give the tank an ID of 100,030. You can choose any number, given the condition I gave earlier. That's the tank body image. And the +M indicates now that the graphics start at 300,000, that's with the plus. And +M means that it's mirrored. So it assumes that only 17 are used and the other 15 are going to be mirrored, and the same for the CC layer, the same for the turret. And we set the animation to random. You can remove it if that's what you don't want. And that's a level. That's at which level it's rendered. That's ground level. Here that's marker. That's just below, like just above ground. I'll provide some more details later what kind of levels we have. For air units, it would be the upper level. But if you would look at the other units, but here it is a unit that runs on ground level. Now let's go to the tank. So here the custom tanks, and that's a description, name, description, color. I think it doesn't matter at the moment, it's not used. The altitude, I mean you use sub for underwater or level, that's for ground level, or air for your air units. That's a default altitude. Obviously the Chinook can go up and down. That's the radius in tiles. That's half a tile approximately. I think you can go up to 1 tile, but due to pathfinding and so I think more than 1 is not possible. You can look at the aircraft carrier for more details. I think that's a max we can use. How the unit works in Fog of War. just regular fog of war. You can disable it so it would be always visible. If the tank can move on water, no, it's not a hover tank. It moves on bars, yes. You can change directions, of course. If it crashed, that's the animation that is shown. If it's destroyed, oh, that's I think for Battle Royale mode. Then if it can be selected and what selection group it belongs to. That's how much it costs to build the unit and how long it takes to build it. That's how much it is when you destroy the unit, to remove it. And that what I'm missing here in the example is you can define too which factory it's going to be built in. I kind of forgot to do that for the example. Then here it describes how the unit moves. The speed, that's I believe in tiles per second. If it can pause, yes, obviously for some air units such as the fighter jet, they can't pause, they have to just fly and fly. It would be a little bit funky if they would just stop midair. Run span. It's a good question what that is. Should provide in detail how it moves during rain, how fast during snowy tile. And here you can modify the original assets, but every time we provide an update, it's going to be gone whatever you did. If you replace the model directly with whatever we provided, so instead of adding it to the heavy transport and heavy airlift directly, we can just say add this tank to the heavy transport and heavy airlift and allow it to be also hosted in those transports. Then if you can raise, yes, that's I think for raised units only. The speed for the rotation speed, I think it's degrees per second, and how fast it would still move if it rotates. So it doesn't rotate in place, but it rotates a little bit in a circle. You can also set it to 0. If it rotates to squad orientation, if you place it in a squad, it doesn't have an angle speed, it just goes. Yes, I think that's just for some of the rockets. And the tracks it lays. And how often it lays the tracks. Every 0.1 tile, another track is going to be laid. That's component that can be owned by one of the factions. That's the regular detection at night, and cloak vision. That's also tile ready, how many tiles it can see, and if it can move the flag for capture the flag. Then here hit definition, how much damage it can take, and here is how much damage based on the attack modality that I described here. It will resist. I think the armor is like how much it will resist. For example, what is it? I think hit would be bullet, so that's in percent about. So it will resist bullets rather well, but it doesn't resist, for example, explosions that well. So 100 is the default, and this is for EMP, how much it resists EMP, 100%. Oh no, how much the default resists. You can set it to max, I think, so it doesn't get affected by EMP pulses. Then, if it's gonna be destroyed, once it's destroyed, removed when it's been destroyed, yes, I mean it's gonna be an explosion and the unit is gone. And you can define what happens when it's destroyed. You get the sound effect, you get an explosion, and it stays a little bit of a remain on the ground for a while. If a unit can fight, that's a definition here, like a level, it's an armament on level. Ground, its shell, how often it can reload, if it can do bursts, and how many milliseconds between each burst, and then it has to wait again 300 milliseconds. Here is because you don't want the shell to start in the middle of the tank. It defines the length of the turret and then it exits the turret. And here is the 0.3 over ground, 0.65 from the center of the unit. There is gonna be a shell exiting from the tank. So yes, can set it to 0, but it would all start in the middle of the tank, which is no good, obviously, and the effect it would, the sound effect for shooting. And you can change the angle direction. That's if the unit is erased once it shoots. That's true, for example, for the landmine. And that's how fast the turret can turn. And how fast the turret can turn up and down, but we don't have that in that tank. It's just static. Then here, before we get to specs, now here we have the visual assets. We have the icon for the tank that's already defined in the game. You can supply your own. That's the marker that's shown on the map if you zoom out. And here are the parts that are rendered out for the tank. So if the tank is flying, it obviously doesn't, but that means if it's ejecting from the air or spawning, it shows a parachute first and a parachute shadow at the bottom. Then we regulate the regular tank body. Move means that if it's moving or not. 0 means not moving, 1 means moving, and here's the directions. DS stands for 32 directions, and we have some of them mirrored. I think there's another one there. D2Q, I forgot what it is. I have to provide more documentation. If you don't want to do 32 direction, you can change it. So if it's not moving, we just turn the animation off, and if it's moving, the 2-frame animation I mean, if it's moving, it's just on. Then we have the armament directions, that's also 32, similar to the tank. That's rendered on top of the tank. And then the parachute above, that's also predefined. You can have your own parachute if that's what you want. And also it's only shown when it's flying. Then here, if you want to show the mini progress bar when it's being created or deleted. And the offset of, for example, the goal marker, if that's a goal target, a goal source, that's where the marker is going to be shown in pixel offsets. And you may be wondering what's that all about. So if you go to template, no wait, it's not template, it's scenario, you can show the markers. The markers here on top, that's the roof. Then let's go back in. And the markers here at the bottom, and that's a sign. That's the strength bars and stuff. How they are offset from the center of the unit in pixel coordinates. And I maybe should show you that too. That shows the center of gravity of each object when it would be on the ground. If you need that and you do 3D modeling, you might want to see, hey, does it look alright? Is the center off or not? Let's go back. And that's the rendering for when the unit is selected. For example, you see the circle that's appearing. The unit is selected, that's the width in pixels, 64 pixels. So it's smaller for trees. I think it's auto-calculated for some units, so you don't necessarily have to set it. But sometimes it doesn't work well for all the units, for all the trees and stuff. And then last but not least, we have the sound effects. And the tank is selected, that's also predefined. You can change it if you like, or when you target, tell the tank to go somewhere, that's the sound effect that's being played. And here's another one when the tank is in motion. That's a looping effect. The game internally calculates how many troops are moving and just adds them all up just to the matching sound effect. And now we already updated before, but let's say you made some changes. You update again the custom bundle configuration and just add the new tank. Again, it's already in there. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And now the tank will come up as a unit that we can use in the game. Let's save it. And all the units IDs start at the very bottom. I mean, we saw here for the nature, it's a neutral unit, it's the tree comes up at the end. But now for the factions, we have now our custom tank here. And maybe we can display of markers and the stuff off. And that's our custom tank, and it's just play and see how it already works.
Got it.
Yes, that's it.
On it.
That's how you get your own custom tank or other unit in there. I know there's some documentation missing. I'm gonna provide it. You probably should ask also on the forums or on the video how it all works. Then last but not least, I know this is a very long video. There's another option. You can create your own sound effects. Let's go back in here. Just one simple effect. I recorded my voice. Ready, sir?
Ready, sir.
It's here. You can record your voice and you create either WAV file or an MP3, but maybe for short sounds I recommend WAV. For more than 5 seconds, maybe in 3 seconds, do MP3 for music and stuff. That's so the ready, sir. Let's see. Where were we? So ready, sir. So here asset. Here is a list of the graphical assets we load. And then here at the bottom I have one sound effects that I'm loading. That's like this. Also we give it an ID. The ID is going to be the same as for the both faction, but it doesn't matter. Graphical IDs and sound effect IDs, they're separate, so they can be the same. I usually try to make them somewhat similar, that similar troops get the similar IDs compared to the graphical IDs compared to the sound effect, but you can number them whatever you like. Give it a name and also the link to the WAV file. I suggest do it mono sound to save space. I don't think you need stereo. I think it, because there are a lot of troops are rendered in stereo already, kind of. Not actually, but stereo or mono, it doesn't actually matter. So I would say to save space, it saves about half the bytes. Just do it in mono and export the WAV file, whatever you recorded, maybe your voice. And if you go back to the examples, for example, if I took the commander that I have defined, see that's the default command is defined here in objects here. Let's find him. That's the guy or the girl. So I could copy paste it in that file here and overwrite everything to give the commander like a special thing. But maybe I just want to use the defaults. So, and I also want to use the default graphics. But what I want to do is when the commander is selected or targeted, it has a different sound effect. So what you do is you take everything, you take the command and you just define that you want to have the sound effect changed. And here what I did is the Ready Sir SFX sound effect. Oops. The Ready Sir SFX. Here. That's just SFX dash and then the ID number. And I just here replace it with my own voice. And I already updated the map, so let's see how it works. And by commander I don't mean the commander robot. The commander robot is the same, but that's the commander.
Ready, sir.
Now you can hear my voice. Ready, sir.
Ready, sir.
And then...
Ready, sir.
Yes, that's it, to create your own custom sound effect. Yes, that explains the basics. There can be everything modded from tiles to... Oops, that's my sister. Everything modded. So just ask if you need more details and I will provide them too. I also update the manual too. I'm maybe gonna add the parameters, list of parameters. And if you're not aware of, you can just export it. You just go, if you don't want to read it in the game. It's document, it's an RTF file. You can also update the regular, export the regular game manual that way. And you can just read it in Word, like print it. It comes up in a different window. So that's a modding guide. So it's a little bit more easy to read probably than maybe on black background. And yes, And yeah, let me see what you see. Let me know what you think, and I guess that's it for today. Thanks for watching.